Say, I'm Justine Burdette, Associate Publisher of MiBiz. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the Manufacturing Change live stream. Manufacturing is always in a state of change, and today that change is happening at a faster and faster pace. All the shocks to our system breed a new array of ideas, solutions, and technologies. Trying to understand it all and then incorporate that into what you are doing is become a job unto itself, which is why we are pleased today to partner with Terry Hossink, Vice President of Manufacturing Services at The Right Place, and go in depth with these monthly conversations. Our purpose is to highlight best practices that offer you direct, actionable solutions and introduce you to supportive folks offering their know-how and can-do attitude to tackle the most pressing manufacturing issues. Terry?
I would like to remind everyone that we are recording today's session, and the replays and links to the sources can be found in all sorts of places. MiBiz.com/manufacturing change, all of the MiBiz social media changes, and the Right Place social media as well. Additionally, this live stream is being turned into a podcast. Manufacturing can be found wherever you get your podcast. Hit the plus button on the bell and subscribe, and you'll never miss an update. Lastly, we encourage you to use the chat Q&A function in your control panel to send us comments or questions as we talk today. This conversation is for you, and we love the audience participation.
So our panelist has joined us. Yay! Olivia Lonto, Business Development Manager at The Right Place. Olivia has worked for The Right Place for 3 years and is a facilitator for its Supply Chain Management Council. Before that, she held a number of other positions, including one at a logistics company. Olivia, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Justine and Terry. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. So many people may not realize that supply chain management is a vast topic. We're not going to be able to cover it all in 30 minutes. Our aim today is to do 2 things. Let's get a look at what the current procurement recommendations are for the next 12 to 24 months, and let's hear about the different ways of thinking. We know there are all new thoughts, products, and challenges in front of us. So, Olivia, from a macro point of view, we've had some issues over the last couple of years. Have we been here before? And what are the indicators telling you about the status of procurement moving forward in the next calendar year?
Terry, that is a question I've heard quite a lot lately. So to get you to where we're at today, I'd like to start with a little history. Hopefully not too many people in the audience will be bored by this, but I'll start at the very beginning. So long ago, supply chain could be lumped into just logistics, materials management, transportation. It goes all the way back to the days of Napoleon. He was the first one to figure out that if you can, his troops, they marched on their stomachs. So he figured out that if you strategically position your materials, your foods ahead of the troops, then you're at an advantage. So it comes from the French term login, which is where the modern word for logistics comes from. So we evolved from there, and supply chain begins to involve sourcing and production planning. It's a lot more strategic. You're matching up your production to your logistics. You're getting everyone from engineers to custodial involved. Then from there, we go a little further and we say, okay, we can get some process improvement out of our supply chain. And we're marrying another function into that. So prior to this, operations management was kind of separate, but adjacent function to supply chain. Now they're interlocking them. And you're looking at the value chain all the way upstream, all the way downstream to the final customer. We're talking about hundreds of touch points that can all be optimized. Then we go on even farther and we say, okay, that was going really well. We can apply these supply chain principles to product innovation strategy. And then and that's kind of where we're at today, where the supply chain is involved all the way up from a tiny little piece of plastic. You need to start building it to, thinking about what the customer looks for next and how your company looks the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So it went from being this very straightforward marching order almost of get the materials to us most efficiently to this really intricate, complex, and central function to any successful manufacturing operation today. So I will say that I don't think the whole world recognized how much we were leaning on our supply chains until we had a great big event. Of course, that was COVID. And as we're slowly rebuilding to this model that was nimble and cost efficient, we see that although we had efficiency, we also saw its greatest flaw of fragility. So, in short, that was not short, but in short, no, we haven't been here before. As far as to our modern supply chain, this is very unique. And so, to answer the second part of your question, what do I see for procurement in the future? As a response to this, the name of that game is really going to be sacrifice. There's not going to be any replicating your supply chain to pre-COVID times. There's no such thing as a one-to-one replacement here. So you're going to have to look at what you really need out of your supply chain and say, what are we going to sacrifice to build a new strategy?
So what you're trying to say is that we created our own problem by trying to improve.
That's exactly it. It was layers and layers and layers of improvement that made it very streamlined, but also gave it, there were those hundreds and hundreds of points that I talked about being optimized were also hundreds and hundreds of points where it could break.
So why don't you tell us, at this point in time, we're in February 2023, are things are better or worse than they were 12 months ago, 24 months ago? Why not?
I'm going to change your question a little bit, and I'm going to say it's not better or worse, but simply that it's different. If you hated your supply chain before COVID and wanted to fix it, you're probably super excited because you get to start from scratch. But it's most definitely harder to try to do the same thing. So again, my recommendation is to stop expecting the same thing. And, depending on what your goal is, your response to that rebuild or reignition is going to be a little different. Are you a just-in-time manufacturer or a low-cost manufacturer, or heaven forbid, both of those things at the same time? Then you might be looking at reshoring, pulling things out of Asia and eliminating long transit times. But you're probably looking at doing that in Mexico, not the US. Or maybe your biggest concern was the availability of certain raw materials. You're probably looking to increase your supplier pool for the same materials, so you might lose that bulk buy benefit. So the biggest thing here is that all of our chains aren't going to be the same. I think this is a great thing because through that long history that I told you about, that process, a lot of people were seeing a best practice from the automotive industry, a best practice from agriculture industry. And everybody was saying, oh, look at that, how very innovative, it's working for them. We can apply those same principles to ours. But now we've got a chance here where different industries can reset to best practices for their industry, not just the continuous layering of the next big improvement. We get to deconstruct those layers. And then depending on how open you are to the change and how strongly you can champion that new idea within your company, that's going to determine your speed to success in your new supply chain.
So success is going to be determined as something different than it was in the past, is what I'm hearing as well.
Yes. Again, my biggest recommendation is change your benchmarks.
Okay. Interesting. So I know that this is actually the point where I am supposed to come in and, move us on to the next topic, but this is actually kind of blowing my mind a little bit just in terms of, changing your benchmarks, having to have, I would say, much higher level conversations, right? Again, it was my understanding when I first got into the industry 10 and 15 years ago, right, that procurement was kind of like this little siloed part of your organization, right, that just made sure that your milk runs came on time, right? You had what you needed. They were kind of looked at, as a cost center, right? And so really, we have very much seen kind of that flip on its head for the entire supply chain, part of your organization, in that they are much more integrated into a lot of other conversations, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'm still working through my mind this concept of, figuring out what really is the most important thing of value for you and that you provide to your customers, right? And setting up your supply chain around that unique value, right? And just recognizing that there are probably going to be sacrifices you're going to have to talk about going forward that you maybe didn't in the past. So, I I'm still turning all those over in my mind. I know we could be here for a while, but it's my job to keep us moving on today. So I wanted to actually get your response, Olivia. Something that we've reported on at MiBiz are some other factors that are coming into play. And a big one we're hearing a lot about is the social governance, social responsibility piece, and how that kind of wave, that movement, that outside pressure from outside of manufacturing is now really influencing how manufacturers do what they do. Can you kind of break that down a little bit for us? It seems as if it's a function that's falling under supply chain a lot of times, so that's why I want to bring it up.
You're not wrong there, and in fact, we kind of look at three parts: ESG, environmental, social, and governance, being corporate governance.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, going back to what I said previously, there's hundreds and things going into the supply chain. So it's probably the area where you're going to be able to find improvements for those. So it is falling on supply chain. So much so we have a conference coming up next month in March, and we've got a whole session on that if you need to know more. But I can get into the basics here. Environmental, that's, companies considering how they safeguard the environment, what their corporate policies might be doing to address climate change, or their role in what has been discovered there. The social criteria is how it is the examination of how it manages relationships with employees, with suppliers, with its customers, and then also the communities in which they operate, where their operation plants are, where they're pulling materials from. So kind of that whole ecosystem. And then governance, that's the part that deals, that's a bit more internal. That's where the company's leadership, we're talking about executive pay, shareholder rights, things like that. Who's controlling what? And so in the end, it's all of those things can be improvements to those, and by improvements, I'm not talking savings that we normally say when we're talking improvements, but we're just talking better practices. And so in the end, this really isn't a company looking to improve the bottom line. This is, in fact, probably going to be an expensive endeavor for most of these companies, but it's really a protection factor. This is how corporations are going to protect themselves from external and internal risk. And a lot of those risks, again, live within the supply chain. We're talking things like shutdowns and strikes, pollution, reliance on antiquated manufacturing methods. And so this is a proactive approach to fixing a lot of those things, or if not fixing, improving or avoiding. And ultimately, they're not going to let one of their suppliers blow it for them. They're going to expect the same standards to go down their supply chain. So whether you're upstream or downstream, if you touch it's usually an OEM that's putting in these kind of standards right now. If you touch one of their products, sooner than later, probably I'd say next 12 to 18 months, you're going to start seeing some of those requirements hit you. And this topic, it's been brewing for years, but again, we had that big event, we had COVID, that's really been a catalyst for this implementation. When all of our supply chains broke, we said, okay, we'll go in and rebuild. But as we rebuilt and looking at each individual part of our very big, very global supply chain, so we were kind of smacked in the face with a few of the errors of our ways. So, and here I'm talking about, maybe how you're relying on a certain partner, or you want to keep someone in your supply chain. That might not be the best idea for you anymore. An example that always comes to mind for me is maybe your 3M, and you in 2019, all of your masks that you sent to hospitals, all were made in China with Chinese labor. But once you put a pinch on them, like a global pandemic requiring everyone to wear masks, they can break their contract and simply keep the PPE to themselves. Them keeping that was better than keeping the relationship for 3M. So our supply chains were at the mercy of a government function that was totally out of our control. And then we're also talking about politics and economics. And, as you look for international partners, we're doing so kind of with more hesitancy and intention, looking a little deeper, are there human rights implications? Is there an unstable government here that could cause issues? So again, the risk and cost game is higher than ever, and this governance, this oversight, is really to protect companies from exposing themselves to that and exposing their customers to that. So there's a lot of ways to do this, but I will this is coming. People are going to have to comply with it. And let me be the first to say your customers will be unreasonable. They are not going to understand why. You're going to have to figure out where to push these costs onto people. Maybe you gave up a foreign contract and brought manufacturing here, so it's a bit more expensive. Who's going to pay for that? And what's more important, losing a contract with an OEM because you couldn't play with their ESG requirements, or losing customers. So it's going to be a big era of kind of internal reflection on our own supply chains and where we want those to be.
Yeah. I love though the way that you opened, this part of our conversation in framing ESG as potentially a filter to look at how do we, do better going forward in the future, right? What can we continuously improve on, and layering some of these things in. So I guess one follow-up question I had for you, Olivia, given that you're kind of our resident expert for today, and we want to give people at least some nuggets of, how to do this balancing act, right? I mean, so what in your work talking with supply chain, managers and directors, have you found some things that have been working for them in terms of how they have balanced cost and risk?
It's a great question. And let me just start by saying, balancing the cost and risk, that seesaw before of cost and risk, let's say it was right here. It's not even the same seesaw anymore. It starts up here. So if you try to balance it down here, you'll never find the level playing field. So you got to get that reframed mindset and say, okay, what are we willing to pay, and what are we willing to mitigate, and where's our happy ground in there? How do we balance that seesaw? But a lot of what folks have been doing, really looking at their labor, a lot of discussions there, implementation of technology has been a big help, with labor inavailability, and then also avoiding outsourced labor to other countries, or that lengthen the supply chain, keeping it tighter. So really automation is kind of the name of the game right now, while everybody figures out what they can do.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And then just a little bit on that, onshore, nearshoring. Again, we're hearing just a lot about how people are reframing. Where is my stuff coming from? Where are my components coming from? What am I, that whole make versus buy question. I know people are kind of going literally back to square one on that. Again, anything that you can share with us in terms of what seems to be working for some of our West Michigan manufacturers, or is it really company by company, product by product, right?
Again, that's going back to, what's your goal? And so, but a lot of people have been able to justify that, hey, our goal is to make sure we are a reliable supplier for these OEMs. So if that means we need to make our supply chain shorter, we've seen a lot of folks nearshoring, reshoring, finding, again, that technology, that implementation of automation has helped keep costs down to keep it competitive. Of course, we're not there yet. That's no secret that it's not a one-for-one replacement, but that shorter supply chain, it reduces a lot of risk, and it makes our suppliers more reliable.
Yeah, I gotcha. Well, and again, you mentioned it before, but I want to make sure to give you time and space. It was on our initial slide, but you're going to have like a whole half day, 2/3 of a day, going really in depth on these topics coming up in March, right?
Right. Yes. And so, anybody listening, I invite you to join the Supply Chain Management Conference on March 22nd. If anything from this conversation piqued your interest, I'm sure I didn't get into all the details of it, and we will have experts at the conference who can dive much more into the topics, how it's done, what you can expect, kind of the inspiration behind a lot of this ESG stuff. But that, again, that's March 22nd, the Supply Chain Management Conference. More info about that is on the Right Place site, rightplace.org/events, and you can find the registration and everything there. And we've got a really great lineup, a lot of innovative topics that we haven't touched on before, and I think the speakers are going to be some of the best.
Yay. Oh, good. Well, and speaking of questions and getting some additional answers, there is one that I wanted to share with you from someone who's listening in right now. Thank you so much, Ryan. So this is for Olivia. How do you see supply chains taking on net zero carbon?
Whew, with a lot of kicking and screaming. I don't see a lot of there's a big group of companies in West Michigan who have roots over in Europe, and they are ahead on this game, and they want to do the same over here. So I talk to companies, and they're saying, "Hey, we want to." Get to a certain type of, we want to be using a certain type of energy, or we want to stop using a certain product. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I am saying it's promising and that the desire is out there. So I think we can see that. And then as that desire meets the ability to do so, when that happens, how that happens, that's kind of still in the magic ball right now.
Yeah, I gotcha. I would say that that is definitely something that you should probably connect with Olivia one-on-one about, right? Yes. Awesome. We
Please
will make
do, please
Olivia's
do.
contact information available so that you can send those questions and kind of do that deep dive one-on-one. So wonderful. I was going to say that is the only question we've got in the chat at the moment. Although, if something comes to mind, certainly do not hesitate to ask. Even after we finish today, there are absolutely, I mean, Carrie's information, my information, Olivia's is all out there. You can leave a question, on MiBiz's Facebook or LinkedIn. We would be happy to answer them, or you can email us directly. So I was going to say, Terry, anything as we kind of finish up today?
Well, I was going to ask Olivia if she had any one single point she wanted to leave the folks with. I know that's a big area, but what's on your mind there?
Ooh, my big takeaway again is just that do not expect, if you keep operating, if you're trying to rebuild your supply chain to what it was, don't expect it to do what it used to do. Remember, there's going to be a sacrifice. Have a team meeting to decide where that's going to be, how you're going to do it, and then really champion that throughout the whole company so everyone understands.
All right. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Justine. Supply chain. Well, most people seem to think it's just moving things from one place to the other. Like everything else in our world, is facing new hurdles. It's shifting quickly, adapting, learning new emerging technologies. As companies out there must look for these new methods. The Michigan Manufacturing Technology Center has people connect you, whether it's ESG or automation. We're happy to do that. Olivia talked about Supply Chain Council. Please come visit us that day. There is a wonderful group of people who are speaking. And as well as if you're looking for automation, my team at the center can help line you up. We have both an assessment that we can do, and there are funds available through the MEDC that allows a matching grant of $25,000 for companies who want to start on this journey. So, feel free to give myself a call. Olivia can connect, as well as Justine. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Terry, Olivia. And ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our time. Remember all of our housekeeping items from the beginning. If you found this conversation of value and want to keep it going, the recording and resources are here for your use. And if you aren't already getting it, please sign up for MiBiz's Morning Edition newsletter. It's free and a great way to get all that industry reporting for news that you rely on. And again, Olivia, thank you so much. This conversation would not have been as robust without your candor and your insights. We're looking forward to seeing your conference in March. That concludes today's live stream. Till next